A long, long time ago, I was born. Yes, it was a long, long time ago, in a northern town of England called Gateshead. Um, Within this town, there are a number of suburbs, and I kind of never realized this before sort of reading the book, but there are a number of suburbs um, with names that contain the word fell in them. The ones that come to my mind from my childhood are Gateshead Fell, Low Fell, High Fell, and the junior school I attended was actually called Fell Dyke. And it never really occurred to me that the geographical term fell, I think it means sort of, and we can talk about that, but I think it means high barren landscapes. But this geographical term is actually non-existent in North America. You go, what's a fell? And they go, I don't know. Is it like chopping a tree or something? So today, certainly for the North American contingent, we're going to demystify all of that and delve into the essence of fell running. Watch this space. Hi, and welcome to Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners to help you decide if you'd like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running, maybe inspire you to try something new or different. My name's Alan, and with my co-host Liz, today we're going to talk with author Richard Askwith. Actually, for the second time, we're going to talk with author Richard Askwith. But today about his book, Feet in the Clouds, a classic book, a tale of fell running obsession.
Feet in the Clouds is a deep dive into the world of fell running. It talks about the history of the sport, some of the greatest of all time, like Bill Teasdale and Kenny Stuart, and professional versus amateur races, and a lot more. At the same time, the author tells the story of his own journey in fell running and his quest to complete the Bob Graham round in under 24 hours. Richard Askwith is a UK Northamptonshire-based journalist and author whose passions include running, outdoor adventure, and traditions and ordinary people of the English countryside. So this book about fell running is actually all of those, all wrapped up in one. He has written 6 books, including Running Free and Today We Die a Little, the story of famous Czech runner Emil Zatopek, and the subject of a previous episode that we did with Richard. So welcome to the podcast again. So this is a return for you.
Thank you very much. It's great to be back. And yeah, I'm very honored to have been asked back again.
Yeah, it's really great to have you. We like having people back. It's kind of fun. And so this book is actually not new. It's a book that you wrote a while ago, and it's a 20th anniversary edition that just came out. So I guess tell us how you first ended up writing the book, and then did you ever think that you would have a 20th edition release, like another release of this?
It absolutely never occurred to me. I'll answer your questions backwards if that's okay, actually.
No
It never
problem.
occurred to me that I'd have a 20th anniversary edition released. And when the publisher got in touch and said they were thinking of doing it, my first thought was, well, that's completely bonkers. No one's going to be interested. The book came out 20 years ago. No one's going to be interested anymore in what I described. But then I sort of read the book again, which I hadn't done for years and years. And it was sort of a pleasant surprise because when I was writing it, I was describing this sort of obscure sporting world, this little niche of the sporting world that hardly anyone had heard about. I had spent years immersed in it. It was just the bit of sport that I loved and that was my sort of sporting life. And when I wrote the book, I thought I was sort of writing about the world as it was. I was saying, look, here's this world and you haven't heard of it, but this is what's going on. But reading it 20 years later, it's more like sort of I've written a history book. The world isn't like that anymore. So much has changed in running and in sport in the world in the past 20 years that it almost feels more interesting and more valuable to read about how things used to be in England in the 20th century. I mean, the book came out 20 years ago, but a lot of it describes what happened in the 1990s and the 1980s. It goes all the way back to the 19th century actually, but it's a lost world anyway. And I should probably maybe just talk about what fell means. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not a complicated thing, but it's the Cumbrian word for mountain, I think, or hill. I don't think anyone made much difference between a hill and a mountain. And Cumbria, the Lake District is one of the most mountainous, is the most mountainous part of England, and it's where this sport has been practiced for as long as anyone can remember. And it's probably not that different from what the Americans call trail running, except that because Britain is such a small, cramped country, we don't necessarily have many trails. And all the early fell runners in the Lake District, it wasn't about running on trails or tracks or paths or anything. It was about just running on the raw mountainside, on the rocks, on the scree, through the heather and the bracken, whatever it was you found there.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of quite extreme version. And I've known people who live, lifelong fell runners living in mountainous areas in England who think, oh, running on trails, that's like, that's pathetic. That's like being a road runner or something like that.
It's like doing a paint by
Yeah.
numbers rather than just having a blank canvas and going for it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's pretty interesting. Well, actually, I don't know whether it's interesting. It's just me being weird. But trail running describes the track you're running on. Fell
Mm.
running describes the whole geography that you're in.
And that absolutely, I think that's a really good point. And to me, that is sort of the beauty of fell running is it's not just about the running. It's about the mountain is this sort of wild beast, and you've got to understand it with your heart. You've got to really get in the mindset of the mountain. Part of the art of being a good fell runner is just choosing the right route. You've got to start at the bottom, and you've got to go up to the top, and then maybe up to the next top, and then maybe another top, and then come back down again to the finish. How you get there is entirely up to you. And the canniest runners are the ones who make the right decisions. It's not just about fitness and going forward in a straight line fast. It's about balance and agility and reading the landscape and knowing whether the rock you're about to stand on is solid or if it's going to slip away from under you. I mean, there's a whole art to it, and that art is very much about understanding nature, and that makes it difficult, but it also makes it incredibly rewarding.
And so, is this the equivalent of, because I had my previous coach, he had gone to the World Mountain Running Championships for Canada.
Right.
In your book, like I know that you talk about fell running and fell runners coming from North America and like not really being the same breed. So it is sort of like mountain running over here. Is that kind of the equivalent, or is mountain running still more like trail running, and
It's
fell running is more like wild running, like just
I
running
think that
through
it
anything?
all overlaps. There aren't any
Yeah.
clear boundaries. It blurs, and you know, at most world mountain running championships, there will be fell runners from England taking part.
Okay.
Um, I know there's in the past at different times with international events there have been controversies because for the English runners, the real skill of fell running is running downhill. It's running downhill fast over really rough, suicidal terrain,
Yes, and it sounds like it's pretty dangerous.
and it can be pretty dangerous if you're half-hearted about
It actually sounds like the antithesis of what Liz would like to do.
Yeah.
it. Well, I bet you should try it. Maybe that's the secret thing you're missing in your running.
Mhm.
But I mean, I know there are some countries where actually they scorn the whole idea of downhill running, and they think mountain running should be about uphill running, which is theoretically it's harder work and you're going uphill and you're working against gravity, and it's pure athletic strength, and it's not about balance and risk taking and things like that.
But
So
it's
there are
only
definitely different
half of the
approaches.
craft, I guess. Going up is
Exactly.
only
Yeah.
half of the
Yeah.
craft.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I guess you have to come down.
You have to
And
come
who
down.
would want to just go up the hill? I mean, the whole reward for going up is coming down usually.
Well, I think if you're in fell running, we actually say going up is the easy bit. It's going down that's the real.
Do you take caffeine when you run? Lots of people do because it's in gels and stuff. And caffeine's legal and it's been proven to work. There's actual science that shows that it improves your endurance running performance.
And there's anecdotal data from when you have your coffee in the morning and you go for a workout versus when you forgot to have your coffee or you didn't have time and you went for a workout and it was terrible.
And the trouble with coffee is there's a lot of liquid just to get your caffeine dose.
Yeah, so then you have to stop for the bathroom mid-workout. Very impractical. Which is where Caffeine Bullet comes in.
What's caffeine bullet, Liz?
It's it's a caffeine supplement. It's wrapped up like in a candy. So, and it tastes like candy. And you can get 100 milligrams or 85 milligrams, which is about a cup of coffee, but without the liquid.
So we've tried the mint flavor and the chocolate orange flavor. They're both pretty yummy.
If you want to try them for yourself, we do have a 20% off discount code. So go to the link in the show notes and you can check out what Caffeine Bullet is and get your 20% discount.
Pretty generous.
It is pretty generous.
And we'll get a small benefit, so you're helping out the
Speaking of which, back to the podcast. Oh, yeah, I can see that after reading the book and hearing some of the stories and the injuries that people sustained.
yeah,
I
going
feel like,
down's when you're going to get hurt, I guess.
yeah.
On the whole, yeah. But also there've been these great rivalries, over the years in some fell races where, one person would always be fastest going up and the other was fastest going down. It's all the question of whether the person who was good at going up could get enough of a lead to beat the person who was a suicidal descender.
So if I understand it right, and I look at, I don't know, Grasmere, which
Yeah.
is one of the traditional Lakeland key events, or Ben Nevis in Scotland. There's no route that you're obliged to follow, or is
That's
there?
correct. I think actually just very recently it's changed at Ben Nevis, which a lot of
Okay.
people think is a shame. They're saying for environmental reasons people have to stick to a certain route, and that's seen as a great shame. But no, with Grasmere and traditionally with all these races, including Ben Nevis, you could take whatever route you liked,
Okay,
and
or
then
that
Ben
you're
Nevis
prepared to risk,
sorry.
or that you're prepared to take the risk on.
It's partly being prepared to risk, and partly it comes down to local knowledge. And there were all these stories at Ben Nevis where people would, the Southerners would come up and they'd be first to the top and they'd think, fantastic, I'm winning. And then they sort of come down by what they thought was the best route. By the time they got to the bottom, there'd be someone else would be ahead of them. I'm sort of laughing at them because they come down and the better way to come down.
So they don't actually get overtaken, but they end up being
Being beaten
passed.
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you end up like finding this world of fell running? Because you would have, so you wrote the original book in 2004, and so the internet was not as well developed as it is today. So how did you find fell running, and what made it special? Did you run before, and why did you become so, I guess,
You're also what
obsessed?
you're also what I was born in the north of England, so I can say this. You're also what we in the north of England would call a soft southerner.
That's right. I'm a soft southerner. Is there an American equivalent of a soft southerner?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't want to
Um,
get into it.
yeah, no. I can't. I sort of just discovered it by chance. Being a friend of a friend mentioned it, but I was a runner. I loved running. I loved the countryside. I loved hiking in the mountains. I loved nature. I just never knew that you could combine all those things in a single activity. And I think I just heard through a friend of a friend that this thing could be done, and I was persuaded to try it one day, and it was. I remember the first time I tried it, it was absolutely horrendous, actually. Because it was again quite a long distance over some very steep mountains, and you start off thinking, "Oh, this is pretty easy, going really slowly, and it's nice soft grass and rock, and it's all fun." But just the sheer gravity of it and the work you put in, going up, and then the extra work you put in going down. especially if you're a soft southerner and you're very cautious about getting down. You don't want
We
to
all we all are these days.
yeah, exactly. Um, and then you end up getting so totally exhausted that your body just literally gives up. And I remember just thinking, well, I've got to stop. I can't do this anymore. But then you realize that I'm actually out here on a mountainside, and there's no point. If I stop here, I've got to stay here forever.
Yeah, yeah. There's no
You have no
transport.
choice. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no
So
choice but
somehow
to
you
get to the
find these
finish.
ways of dragging yourself on, which is absolutely horrendous, but also is in a way it's it's really rewarding. You suddenly look back and you think, well, I did get to the end after all, and somehow I've done something that a couple of hours ago I thought was completely impossible. But I don't know what I did, but somehow I did find that because I had to, that there was more strength inside me than I thought. And that's a really sort of addictive thing, a rewarding thing, I think.
Do you think there's like a different skill set that fell runners in general have when they're really good fell runners, like as opposed to, let's say, the road marathoners that we see, running marathons so fast. Like it seems like the top fell runners, some of them, at least the ones that you talked about in your book, they seem to be always kind of people that didn't think they had any athletic talent, and then they discover this fell running thing, and they become like the best. Is there something different about the requirements, I guess, that you've noticed?
I think a lot of it is about sort of toughness or resilience, and especially back then. I remember I think somewhere in the book there's a character and he says, anyone can be fit. It's being hard that's hard. And people who can run a fast, sort of 2 and a bit hour marathon, um, absolutely fantastic. I mean, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how you manage to sustain that concentration, apart from anything else, just doing the same thing for such a long time at such intensity. But with fell running, it's not just the sort of the speed and the stamina and the sort of lung power and the heart power. It's about some of it's about balance and agility and things like that. I mean, it's almost like being a gymnast or something like you're leaping from rock to rock. It's amazing watching some of the best fell runners sort of coming down a rocky mountainside and the accuracy and the daring of moving at that speed. It's a bit like free running or parkour and things like that. Um, and the other thing about mountains is they throw a whole lot of other unpleasant stuff at you as well, like sort of bad mountain weather. Many of my, I hate to think how big a proportion of my fell running experience has been done in thick cloud where I haven't been able to see where I'm going, where, and sometimes you're cold, sometimes you're wet, sometimes you're lost. I spent, hours and hours and hours lost on the mountains because this was back in the days before sat nav, and anyway, sort of, I think a lot of us feel that it's sort of that's part of the challenge and part of the reward is learning to navigate with a map and a compass and understanding the landscape yourself rather than just relying on some satellite to tell you where to go. And so there's just so much discouragement that can be flung at you, and to thrive as a fell runner, you've just got to be really resilient. And some of the heroes of Feet in the Clouds, which is, as I said, a lot of it sort of looking at the heroes of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, well, it wasn't so much about them being great athletes. It was about their almost insane toughness. There was a great fell runner called Joss Naylor who died last year. Who was many people considered him the greatest fell runner of all. And I think he actually came out and did Pikes Peak Marathon in the States back in the 70s. But he was a hill farmer. All his running he did, was just fitted in around his hard days outdoor work on the fells anyway. When he started fell running, he was running in his work boots and his work trousers cut off at the knee. He had all these sort of bizarre injuries. Had 2 discs missing from his spine, and he had no cartilage in his knee. And at one point, he he finished a race with 2 broken feet and didn't even notice.
Yeah, I remember reading that. That was incredible.
And there's just sort of story after story after story about Josh Naylor and how tough he was, and, and in some ways it's grotesque and silly, but also there's this heroism to it. And I think that was one of the things that I found just fascinating about fell running and made me want to write the book. Is that the greats of fell running are just amazing people. They're amazing athletes who in terms of the rewards that other top sports people, elite sports people get, British fell runners then especially got nothing. Just got nothing. Full stop.
Hmm.
Um, and no one had heard of them, and yet they have these astonishing abilities. They've done these astonishing things, and they have this sort of amazing courage, this sort of stoicism, this ability just to soak up pain and shrug it off, as Joss Naylor used to say. He's got to shrug it off, lad.
Do you think that's why? Um, well, no, let me rewind a little bit. I think as people who are interested in running books, we were targeting this book for a long time. Feet in the Clouds, we have to cover that because it's a classic. It's kind of known in the genre as one of the books that everybody should read. And do you think what you've just described is maybe a good part of the reason why people think about it like that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think
There's sort of a certain you describe the sort of purity of effort and the heroicism of the people who had nothing at stake other than personal pride or local infamy. I mean, around
yeah,
about
yeah.
about I don't know a 10-mile radius there were superstars, but after that they were unknowns.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if Feet in the Clouds was successful, it was really more to do with the people who were in it than about anything I brought to it. I think I remember writing the book, and it was my first book, and a lot of the time when you're writing, you have a lot of self-doubt. You think, oh, no one's going to be interested in this, etc. But
Mm.
then I find myself writing the stories of Joss Naylor or Billy Bland or Helen Diamantidis. I mean, all these sort of heroes of the book. And you just think, this is so interesting. It's so encouraging. Just think, no one can not be interested in this because, um, these are people whose stories haven't been told before, haven't been told elsewhere. Um, and it's just that sort of kind of sporting greatness that transcends a particular sport.
And so the other theme in the book seems to be the Bob Graham Round, which is not one mountain, it's many mountains. Um, and you take a few attempts at this Bob Graham round. So maybe just for the people that don't know what it is, I think like a lot of people do know what it is because there's some YouTube videos that have been made about it and stuff like that by a Canadian YouTuber. Um, so maybe you can just describe like what is the Bob Graham round? Why is it special? And what's with the sub 24 hour? Like why would anybody like why is that the goal for a lot of people? You included.
The Bob Graham Round is a circuit of mountains. It's 42 mountains, all in the Lake District. If you do the circuit without getting lost or going off route, it's about 66 miles, but it's got a lot of very steep up and down. So I think the total ascent and descent is about the same as Everest, from sea level. So that's a lot to do in 24 hours. There had been a tradition for a long time of a 24-hour fell record in the Lake District, but there was one particular person called Bob Graham who set this record in 1932, and it was like so far ahead of what anyone else had done that a lot of people didn't believe he could possibly have done it. Although he did have witnesses at the time, but it just seemed absolutely incredible. And then for decades afterwards, for nearly 30 years, people kept trying to do it again, to do what he'd done, to do all 42 peaks in 24 hours. And they couldn't do it. And it became like this obsession, especially after the end of the Second World War. And people were trying to do these other impossible things like, scale Everest or run the 4 minute mile. And the same people often were involved in all three of those things. People like Chris Brayshaw, Eustace Thomas, all had there's sort of all these crossovers between them, and they're all sort of impossible things that people were trying to do. And then, like the 4 Minute Mile or Everest, one person did it, and then once that had been done, then someone else could do it, and then suddenly the impossible had become possible. And I think the first person after Bob Graham to do it did it in 1961, and then within 10 years, about 7 people had done it, and then within 20 years, about 50 people had done it, and it just gradually increased. And when I came across it, I had a couple of friends who were trying to do it, and they told me about it and how difficult it was, and I sort of helped them when they were making their attempt. I sort of ran with them part of the course, carrying their supplies and checking off the peaks they'd been to, and I could see how amazingly difficult. What it took out of them was just unbelievable. But also, you think, how difficult can it be? It's this challenge. It's been done before. All you've got to do is just keep going, putting one foot in front of the other at a certain pace. And I just got this idea that I could do it. And I'm just a very average middle of the pack runner. So it's sort of bonkers, really, for me to think that I could do it. But at the same time, it just became an obsession for me. And in Feet in the Clouds, I talk about how I tried and failed, and I couldn't really accept that I couldn't do it. So I tried again. I kept coming back, trying harder, training harder, all the different things I was doing, trying to learn from proper fell runners what it was. And as Alan said, I was coming into this sport, which is a very, very local northern sport, where all the local people priding themselves on their toughness and scorning the soft southerners who come up as tourists. Here was me as a soft southerner coming up, trying to do the toughest challenge they had. So they all thought I was pretty bonkers as well. But sometimes you just set yourself a goal in running, and you don't want to spend the rest of your life just thinking, maybe I could have done it, maybe I could.
Yeah, you want to try just so
You've
that
got
you
a
don't have
3 hour
to ask
marathon you're
yourself.
aiming for, haven't you?
Yeah,
And you're thinking, you could just give up, just think, well, maybe I'm just not up to it. But you don't want to think you didn't try, do you? There's always this thing.
exactly.
It's about trying to be the best version of yourself, trying to, find that potential.
And did you have a big task in terms of recruiting people to help you? Because when you do this, you have to have witnesses on every one of the peaks of the 42 peaks. So you've got to have and you've got to navigate yourself around. So you've got to have probably some local knowledge. Did you have to sort of, is there a club, or did you recruit people, or did you just bring friends with you?
Well, I mean, when the first time I tried it, it was fairly easy because just all my friends came along and said, "Oh, well, great, this is exciting." So you got all these
Yeah.
friends, recruited local people as well.
Yeah. One-off event.
After failure after failure after
They
all
all-
these people saying, "Oh God, not again." So by the last time I tried it, it was a bit tougher, but I
Yeah.
knew the course pretty well by then, so I didn't need quite so much support.
And is there a formalization? Like, do you have to get, I don't know, a check sheet from the office or something, or
It's very,
is
very
there a,
informal. There is a Bob Graham 24-hour club, but it's deliberately provides almost no support. But they don't want to take responsibility for all the things that people might attempt in the mountains.
Mhm.
They deliberately don't have any money because they don't want anyone to think, oh, we could sue them for something. So it's a very, very low-key, informal thing. But traditionally, what you do is you register your attempt. You say beforehand, right, I'm going to try it on such and such a day.
Okay.
And then afterwards, you write and let them know what the outcome was. And if you've got round, then they'll add you to the list, and you
Yeah.
get a certificate,
Yeah.
and you get the right to go to the dinner they held.
I was actually in, I have some friends who live in Keswick.
All right, yeah.
And I was actually in Keswick one day. And we were walking through the town square, and this battered runner with a big, huge smile on his face came running up with a whole bunch of people around him,
Mhm.
and they were all cheering. And he went up on the steps of the Moot Hall
Mhm.
in the middle, and he stood on the and somebody thrust a bottle of champagne into his hand, and I
Mhm.
thought, oh, I wonder. I didn't really have I don't know, the courage to go up and ask him what the hell he was doing, but I thought, I wonder if he's a completer of the Bob Graham round. He probably was, I
He
guess.
almost sounds very much like he was.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you do that? Did you go? Do you have to go up on the steps of the hall in the center of
No, you
Keswick at the
didn't
end?
go
Is it?
upstairs. All you had to do is just
Oh,
touch the railings on the
okay.
steps. I don't think I could have got upstairs. And I certainly couldn't have got some champagne down.
Are we are we heard in your we heard in your book and we read with enthusiasm. I don't know if this is giving the game away, but you've said that you eventually completed the round after several failed attempts. Um, what was the difference? Did you get lucky or did you just change something?
I think it was a mixture of getting lucky and what I found was that of the many attempts I had, I was never as fit as I was the first time I tried it. I was the fittest I've ever been. I think that was my absolute peak fitness in
Okay.
terms of you put me in a gym or something like that, and it was all
Hmm.
done. I was actually a serious athlete. Um, Later on, I was older. I probably had better technique just in terms of running on all the rough ground. The better you are at it, the less energy you waste. So, I learned just to relax and run quickly down the hills and not tire myself out trying to keep the brakes on all the time. Um, Sometimes I was sort of lucky in terms of the weather because on some of my failed attempts, I had, sometimes really, really bad weather, trying to do it through a raging storm and thick cloud and you don't know where you're going and everything's blowing everywhere and it's starting to get a bit dangerous. And one time I did it and it was absolutely glorious sunny weather and it was just so hot and I virtually got sunstroke.
Oh,
Everyone helping was dehydrated.
one
Um,
extreme to the other.
exactly, yeah. But so, the idea is just, you know, fairly cool, but you can see where you're going. Not wet, but not too hot.
So
Um,
there's a little
but
bit of luck, I guess, in the whole, at
yeah,
least with
but
the weather.
also and things like that. But I think also it's about mindset, and it's quite hard to describe. But there are bits of Feet in the Clouds that I guess are talking about how I adjusted my mindset until I had a more of the mindset of success. I think a lot of the time I was going into it in the early attempts, almost not quite wanting to succeed or just sort of being preparing, thinking I'm going to fail and sort of getting my excuses ready a bit early and all that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, kind of like not believing that success was possible for
Yeah,
you.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think the final time when I did get around, I was just I knew from the beginning, right, I'm going to get around this time. No compromises, no anything. We're just going to do it. And in a way, it was the least memorable of all the circuits I did because nothing really. It just went according to plan.
Yeah, you get all the good stories from where everything goes wrong, or the
Yeah, exactly.
weather's
Yeah,
atrocious, or uh,
yeah.
yeah. I always say to people because I've run several Boston marathons, and I always say the only one I remember is 2018, which was the wettest Boston Marathon in the history of the
Coldest,
Boston
cold and
Marathon.
wet.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Mm.
I remember that. And I have stories about it. At the
Mm.
time, I hated it, but it's the only one that I have a
Yeah,
lasting memory of.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
The Bob Graham round, one of the things about that I was actually aware of is that the record for getting round actually stood for ages, like 40 years or something. That
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
there's a chap called Billy Bland who's one of the heroic yesteryear type attitude figures in fell running, um, who set the record, and it in fact stood until I think it was last year when Killian Jornet, or was it
The,
2023? I
the,
can't remember.
I think Killian broke it first, so it's currently held by an American, Jack
Yeah,
Quenzel.
oh, it's
Um,
been broken several times since then because Killian
yeah,
probably created publicity around it, and then everybody comes flocking in.
yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is that when I wrote Feet in the Clouds, there was a general consensus that some of the records, like that record of Billy Bland's, and some of the record for Ben Nevis and the record for Grasmere, and all the big records would probably never be broken. Had been this sort of golden age of fell running in the 1980s,
Hmm.
especially. And yet, in fact, in the last 5 years, they've nearly all been broken. Not all of them, but most of them. Some of them have been broken repeatedly and by large amounts. Um, and that's because the whole sport has been transformed, really.
Yeah.
You've had this sort of huge rise of trail running and ultra running, not just in America, but in Britain and you get much more international mountain running, so people come to Britain and try their hand at records and things like that. The sport has suddenly become financially very healthy, so there's enough interest in it for manufacturers to make mountain specific kit, all the trail running kit, all the ultra running kit. And then people buy it, and the market is big enough, so then you get sponsored athletes who, and you get pretty much full time athletes attempting these things, um, and so the actual standard in terms of times has really really improved, especially with the long distance ones, because people come from the world of ultra running, which is huge,
Hmm.
and they're well equipped, and a lot of them, a lot of people for a lot of things now use sat nav, which obviously makes the navigation a lot easier. But maybe what has been lost is a lot of the sort of personal relationship between the individual runner and the mountain landscape they're running in. So I guess different people get different things out of the sport. But to me, it was always, and I think to most of the great fell runners I wrote about, it wasn't just about having the best time, although that was important to many of them. It was also about love of the mountains, valuing the mountains, sort of just interacting with nature, and that was a lot of what they got out of it.
You talk about at one point about like recently there being a little bit of a, I don't know if it's like a disregard for safety in the mountains or just maybe like runners being a bit naive about how dangerous mountains are, um, and them kind of trying to do these fell races a bit underprepared or like just not bringing all the right gear with them and
Or
um,
expecting the organization to look at
to
the
look
organizers of
after
the race
them.
to look after them versus taking their own responsibility.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think maybe that last thing is the biggest hazard. I mean, as soon as you get lots and lots of people coming to do an activity which is inherently a bit dangerous, then I guess the chances of things going wrong increase. And a lot of the sort of traditional fell runners were people who lived on the particular fells they ran on all their lives. They just knew the landscape so well, that it was virtually impossible for them to get lost, and they're fairly unlikely to damage themselves either. Whereas now, more and more people coming in from bigger and bigger distances to environments they're not familiar with, there's a lot of scope for things to go wrong. And then you also, as you said, it's this. If you enter a big road race or something like that, you do expect to be looked after a bit. You go there
Hmm.
and you have your kit, and it's taken to the finish, and you get given stuff at the end, and they've thought
There's
of everything.
medical on the course and
Yeah,
Where's
exactly.
my
and
Yeah,
goodie
yeah,
bag? How good is the t-shirt?
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Um, and fell running really isn't like that, or it certainly wasn't like that. Fell running was more that
Yeah.
if you want to wash at the end, there's a stream over there, you can get in that, and if you want to race them, you've got to bring your own safety pins to put it on your shirt because they're not provided.
So do you think that like maybe part of it is just having to, maybe race organizers need to do more education of the population that's coming in? Um, or is it really like the mentality of the people that are coming in is just different?
I think it's a mixture of all sorts of things, because the other big thing that's really changed in Britain is the sense of anyone who organises anything being legally responsible for things that might go wrong, and that just wasn't the case. 30 or 40 years ago, something went wrong, it was your problem. Whereas now, people have been raised in this culture where if something goes wrong, then maybe you sue someone.
Everything is somebody else's fault.
Exactly, yeah, everything's something.
Yeah, I mean, trail running. I hear anecdotally that trail running is the fastest growing running segment of all running. It's growing incredibly quickly.
Yeah.
The trail running is not necessarily fell running. Certainly, fell running talks to the more locally run, old school, minimalist, look after yourself. But trail running is now massive. Does this bode well for the future of fell running, or does this bode badly for the future of you know? Does it mean that fell running will be great, but it'll change a lot, or does it mean that fell running will disappear and the culture that people valued there will disappear?
I don't know. I mean, there's so many different possibilities. I think, as you say, trail running is absolutely huge, and the way it's so successful that sort of encourages certain attitudes. Because if you enter a race and one of the UTMB races or something like that, and you pay £1,000 to enter, you sort of expect a bit in return from the organisers. You expect the organisers to be responsible for your well-being. And one thing that interests me is that when I wrote Feet in the Clouds, and if you read it today, you'll see this, is lots of people were worried that fell running was dying out. There are all these sort of old experienced people, the race organisers and things like that, saying, "Oh, the trouble is, no one's coming into the sport, and there's been a great sport, but it's all be dead in 10 years' time." And that was a big worry. And in fact, the complete opposite has happened, and that's because there are new runners coming into the sport. There are younger runners coming into the sport. People, from a different generation with different worldview, really, are looking at the mountains and thinking, "Yeah, this can be great to run in." So I think that and that's good. It must be good. I think what's happened in England is, it's a very small country. There aren't that many mountains, and fell runners no longer have the fells to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So you go to someone like the Lake District, or someone like the Pennine Way, and there are fell runners, and there are ultra runners, and there are trail runners, and they're all some of them are the same people, skipping from event to event. And if you are, say, doing all those different events, you might use the same kit, for example, for all those different things. So all these different, mountain running disciplines do slightly blur into one another in the same way that, musical genre, you can't always say that this is this and this is that. Is there are mountains and there are people who like to run on them, and they have different attitudes. What I really hope is that people who run in the English fells and who are new to it can learn a bit about the traditions, learn about whose footsteps they're running in, and perhaps feel a bit of respect for the tradition that they're entering into. And as I said earlier, when I came into fell running as this soft southerner with my my fancy new kit and no idea of what I was
I've touched
doing.
a nerve there, haven't I, Richard, with that soft southerner thing? I'm really sorry. I feel compelled to apologize now.
It's all right.
Now he's going to feel bad about himself for the rest of the week.
No, I'm not proud of it. But I felt that it's very important that I did respect the culture I was coming into, and it's like visiting someone else in their home. It's their home. You want to do things their way to a certain extent. And I think, if you're used to running a different kind of running, maybe, and you want to try fell running, then just, come in with a bit of respect and, look around and see if you like what you see. And, a lot of people who love trail running, love ultra running, will try fell running, and it's just not for them. They'll think, well,
this is too many mountains.
Too many mountains. The ground is too rough, or it's too
Yeah.
much about steepness and not much about run.
Yeah, there's not enough running. There's too much hiking up the mountain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think Liz would get mentally exhausted very quickly
I
because
would.
if she has
Because,
to think about where she's putting her feet,
yeah, that's my problem with trail running already. So I think like fell running would just be like, 3 times as bad.
But for me, that's what's so rewarding about it. You have to concentrate all the time so much. Every footfall is different, and you're thinking about it all. And you're not just thinking about, you're thinking about your environment a few feet in front of you. Where am I going to put my foot next? But you're also thinking about the sort of medium range environment. What route am I taking up to the top? Am I going too far to the left, too far to the right? Am I going to go up that gully or beyond it? And then you're also thinking about the much bigger picture. Where am I going after this peak? What's the weather doing? Are the clouds closing in? Do I know where I'm going next? Do I know where I am exactly on the map? And you're just concentrating so much on in so many different ways that it's really, really absorbing, and it's so relaxed. It's so refreshing, really. It's like sort of completely resetting your whole being. And I can think of so many times where I, got to the started off for a day's fell running, and I'm feeling stressed and you know worried about work and all the generally not looking forward. I think, oh, I don't want to run up this mountain; it's miserable.
It's gonna be hard.
And then you get going,
Just
and then
making my
after,
hard day harder.
yeah, exactly. But after a while, you get out there and you're sweating and you're puffing and you're wet and you're muddy and you're totally absorbed. And then it's like, oh, it's just so refreshing. It just clears your whole being and you're a new person afterwards. And that's and I think why I love it as a sport really is that everyone who does it in long term is someone who loves that sort of thing. And you're bonded together by that shared enthusiasm.
Yeah, that seems to also be a theme in trail running in general. It's like I think it's something about doing something hard in a group, There's so many friendships that are forged like in the moments of the race, and then it's almost like you have this intense friendship and it only lasts really the race, and then you go your separate ways. And
it's
yeah,
almost like
it's
the
interesting.
mountain or the course itself is such a hard taskmaster that it very quickly puts you into the mentality of it's all of us against the mountain. It's not all of us against each other.
Mhm.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think maybe there's a few elite ones who are thinking, will I come second? Will I come first? Will I come third? Most of the rest of us, it's really not about beating people. It's about beating the mountain and or beating yourself. And I think that sort of camaraderie that you describe in trail running is exactly the same. I think more so because there's so many more things that can go wrong. And if you're sitting on a scree slope somewhere in a thick cloud and you're lost, or one of you sprained an ankle and you're trying to work out how to get home. But all that sort of challenge just sort of bonds you together, um, and then afterwards people sit around sort of almost competitively bragging about how difficult it was, how much pain there and what injuries they did,
How muddy it was or
how
whatever.
muddy it
Yeah.
was. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a point in the book where you talk a lot about the amateur versus professional runners in the past. Maybe you can touch on that a little bit. Like, oh, what was it with this? There were amateur races and professional races, and they were separate, and runners couldn't partake in both, from what I understood. And is it still like that, or has that changed?
It's not like that at all anymore. So I think there was throughout the 20th century, I guess it was probably pretty much just a British thing. There was this, well, mainly a British thing, this real division in athletics between professionals and amateurs. And, all the official bodies, the Amateur Athletics Association, all the Olympic athletics, that was all amateur. And anyone who was paid for running was considered a cheat. Um, and and that sort of applied throughout running. But I think, on the whole, in Britain, professional running outside the fells basically withered and died by pretty early in the 20th century. Maybe there was a bit carried on in Scotland, but it just didn't happen much, except in the fells and so you'd get all these sort of little local meetings where it would be an agricultural show in the summer, and People would have there'd be prizes for the best sheep and the best hounds and best cabbages or whatever it was they had. Um, and there'd be Cumberland wrestling, and there'd be a fell race, and in the fell race there would be prizes, and the winner might get, it was a tiny amount. The winner might get, £1 or something like that, and the one who was second would get 10 shillings, which was half a pound in those days. And so they were earning very, very little from it, but at the same time they were professionals. And there was this tradition among amateur athletics that if you're a professional, you're a cheat. And I don't really know why it became so heated in fell running, but I think it was in the 1970s especially. And one of the things that was happening then was that in amateur athletics, people were getting paid more and more money, which is a sort of contradiction. But they had started introducing these rules because you could have trust fund, you could be paid money, but you couldn't actually enjoy it, but you could get it later or something like that. And you ended up with this ridiculous. And also, even if you weren't getting prize money, you were getting
Expenses.
You were getting big trophies and things like that. And the other thing, of course, is that the people who did the amateur athletics were the rich people. They were the middle classes, the upper classes, or the polite, respectable, the aristocracy. The only people doing professional running were the working classes of the peasants and the farm workers living in the fells. And so there's this ludicrous hypocrisy whereby the people who were actually getting all the money were condemning the people who had almost nothing for earning a tiny bit of money from their running. And it's also ludicrous. It almost seemed hardly worth writing about. At the same time, it led to a lot of strange feuding on the
Yeah,
fell.
colored the landscape enormously during that period.
And I think it also added to the fact that some of the very greatest British athletes in the 1970s and 1980s, where we didn't really have many great athletes. Well, we did eventually. You had sort of Sebastian Coe and people like that in the 1980s, but until then, it was quite a bad period for British running. And you had these incredible people who were doing things in the fells, but they were condemned as professionals. So people like Fred Reeve, Tommy Sedgwick, Bill Teasdale, Kenny Stewart, they were treated almost like pariahs. And they weren't written about, they weren't celebrated in the press as great examples of British sport. And that seemed to me a great shame and was really unfair. And that was something I was sort of trying to put right a bit in Feet on the Clouds.
Fantastic. One thing that came in towards the end of the book that I was pleased to see was essentially the old school guys were a bit macho. They were passive. I would say they were passively macho. They were
Yeah.
just like hard farmers, and what's the big deal? Tis but a flesh wound. That kind of that kind of Monty Python type. Shrug it off and keep going. Oh, you got broken leg? Oh, I had 2 broken legs last week. No problem. And I thought, oh, that's a bit macho. That's kind of a bit David Goggins, and I kind of wish there was story about females in amongst it. And lo and behold, Richard delivers later on in the book and gives us the story of some other ladies running, and one particular lady, Greek lady, I hesitate to pronounce the name Diamantides or.
That's right. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting, the whole role of women in fell running, and I guess in other forms of running as well. But it was very late, really, that women were allowed to compete, and it was a bit like, I suppose it was a bit like in marathon running and things like that. The earliest female competitors were often, running unofficially. They were told you can't run, and then they ran alongside anyway. And then, by the 1970s, I guess 1 or 2 races were allowing women, just gradually women were allowed to enter. And so you didn't get many great female fell runners simply because there weren't many women taking part. And then, by the time Helene Diamantidis came along, she was probably the first woman who really, really showed that, a woman could not just take part, but could be tougher than 95% of the men as well. And, she won some amazing races, set some unbelievable records. Since she came along, there have been others as well. And if you look at the heights of fell running today, I mean, the greatest living British mountain runner, I would say, is probably Jasmine Paris, who done all sorts of things, including finishing the Berkeley marathons last year, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And there's been many other really top female runners, and there's an argument, and people like Angela Mudge or Nikki Spinks and others, and the more women take part, then the more other women think they'll take part as well. So the sport gradually becomes more even. And I mean, it does seem that with the very, very long ultra endurance events, not only are women capable of doing anything men can do, it's possible maybe women are better than men. I mean, it's the numbers are too small really for anyone to say anything, certainly, but it is fascinating. And of course, a lot of the pioneering female fell runners also had to fight just to get to the starting line. Never mind the toughness required to get to the finishing line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating side of the whole subject.
So we do want to be conscious of your times, but before we let you go, is there anywhere that you would like to direct listeners if they're interested in getting a copy of the book?
I suppose the easiest way, you could either go to the Quarto website, or you could go to my website, which is richardaskwith.com.
Perfect. And is there a place online where you like to hang out, like on social media or anything like that, if anybody wants to follow you there?
I don't do a lot of, I think I'm on Twitter or X, but I don't really do much social media.
That sounded like
Probably.
no.
Yeah, that sounded like
Probably not. If you
don't follow
That was
Richard there.
that was a British response. No.
Go to his
Get
website
this foul
instead.
social media thing off my back. What are you up to at the moment? Just any running related things?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm still running. I'm my the last book I wrote was actually about running in old age. Because
Yes.
I'm now 65. I'm struggling with the challenges of how to keep going when your body starts letting
That
you
interests me a lot because I'm similar age.
down. Right. Well, when you get there, yeah, ask me back.
Okay.
But I would add that whenever I can, I still love to get out in the fells, and I'm a lot. Each time I go back to the fells, I think, God, they've got bigger. The hill's somehow steeper than it used to be. But it's still just as rewarding as it ever was. And I think anyone who's toying with the idea of trying fell running, I think it must be worth trying once. And maybe you won't like it, but if you do, it's just such a rewarding thing.
I guess it's like everything. You can't really decide after one try if you like something or not. You kind of have to give it a few goes, I guess.
Yeah, and then you're hooked and you can't stop.
Yeah, I guess an entry level would be to go hiking. Certainly, I've been with friends hiking in the Lake District and go, "Ooh, this is fun," and I could cover so much extra ground if I was jogging a bit. But I'm with people who don't do that, so and fortunately, geography has kept me away living in Canada. But I shall get back over to there too. Especially as I have some friends who have a place in the middle of the Lake District. I should be visiting them, I think.
I think you should. I think the fells are crying out for you to come and.
Great.
Okay. So well,
we'll...
thanks enormously for your time, Richard. It's been great talking to you. I mean, I think we've just scratched the surface of what is a fantastic book.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I'm sorry not to talk longer, but that's really been really nice talking to you. And
yeah, it's been great to have you back, and Well, we may have you back a third time.
Right. Yeah, okay. Fantastic. Okay.
Look
Brilliant.
forward
Okay,
to
well,
it.
thanks very much. Very nice to talk to you
Great.
both.
Yeah, great talking to you.
Have
Hope
a
it's
great
Okay.
not the
rest of the
last.
day.
And
Yes.
you. Okay,
Take
then.
care.
Bye.
The style of the writing is similar to other books by Richard Askwith. So if you've read any of his other books, we read the one that we mentioned at the beginning about Emil Zatopek called "Today We Die a Little." But the writing is very similar. He kind of always has like several stories going at the same time, and he really like fills in the book with a lot of like history and stories and characters from the topic he's writing about. So uh, yeah, it was really great in that way. Even though they're great stories, I think that anybody that loves, is kind of like adventurous, loves trails, maybe has been doing trail running or ultra running, is that already that kind of person, I think would enjoy this book the most because it's really, I mean, that's what it's all about the adventure. I actually really loved so the cover of the book, I didn't really think to comment on, but it's a great cover. It's got someone running on the top of a mountain, and you see kind of like the some clouds rolling in, and it's really it's like the perfect photo for this book. And there are some photos in the middle, which are really cool because they're from like the 30s, 50s, 60s, some of the greats that he talks about in his book. There's some photos of them, but what's even more, I guess, interesting is that, like we think photos, it's like, we have like a million photos of everything. I mean, you probably have a photo of your breakfast this morning in your phone. But like in the 1900s, I mean, we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have digital photos. So these photos are, they're kind of a rare find. So the fact that, Richard Askwith ended up digging these out, I
Yeah.
thought was pretty amazing because
Also,
they're from way back and
what's cool about the photos is they're not superposed because it's not like in the time of, you know, take a million photographs. It's at a
yeah.
time of, one guy with a camera would take like one photograph and it is what it is.
Hmm.
I know there's one photograph, it's got like a guy in the background and you go, oh, he's kind of, what's he doing in the background? But, that was just kind of how it is.
Yeah, that's because that photo was taken with that guy in the background and you
Yeah.
didn't have like
Didn't have
you
another go
couldn't
at it. You can't
no.
erase him out.
And you didn't have Photoshop or well, not in the way we know it now.
Mm,
So all in all, a good book. I mean, I wouldn't have expected anything less. So
yeah.
it is Richard Askwith we're talking to here.
Yeah, a fantastic writer, a really, really good writer, I think. Clearly a professional from a writing point of view. Um, from my point of view, the points I have kind of covers the same sort of stuff. Stories, interviews, and experiences are interspersed with chapters describing the sort of fell and mountain racing calendar month by month throughout a year. So we get to see, what a year in fell racing looks like. Richard's own Bob Graham round attempt descriptions serves to indicate firsthand how amazing some of the old school fell runners were, because you see him trying to do it and coming across a lot of obstacles that you
Hmm.
could otherwise take for granted. Something that actually Richard touched on right at the start. The book provides an insight into the heroes of fell running as people in terms of the people that they were, and that description in the book now, it's basically a historical treasure, as many of those people have passed away, and the culture of their upbringing, the time, the era that they lived in has sort of passed away as well, has changed quite a bit. So the book from that point of view, is taking on a sort of historical value, which I never really thought about until I got to the end of it. The stories and adventures were great reading, and it made me glad to be safe and cozy at home while I was reading it.
Me too.
But it also kind of made me sad to be safe and cozy at home.
Nah, didn't feel that.
Yeah, but your husband Andre will know what I mean. It's
Mhm.
just great to be out there sometimes and the feeling that you get. So, all in all, well worth picking up a classic.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. Big thanks to the publisher or Impress for providing review copies of the book. And big thanks to Richard for spending time with us today and being our repeat guest. If you'd like to leave us feedback about how we can improve the podcast or want to suggest a book that you'd like for us to review in a future episode, you can leave us a comment on social media. We're Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, we are reviews_running. Please also follow us on social media to find out about new episodes when they're released, or you can just subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform. If you've been listening for a while and are wondering how you can help us out, there are a few ways. If you enjoy the podcast, spread the word, tell your friends, share a link with your running partner if they're looking for something to listen to on their next long run. And you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if that's how you listen to your podcasts. You can also rate us on Spotify out of 5 stars, but it doesn't let you leave us a review. And we are on Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy us a coffee if you'd like. But if you follow us, you can just, go and see
some extra stuff.
What else we have over there.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're guests on other people's podcasts, so we link the episode. Or Alan has this mission to write a book, so he's released 1 or 2
slacking
chapters.
at the moment.
Alan, you slacker. Well, retirement is very busy for you, so
many things to do.
So many things, yeah. And now you're training for another marathon, so I don't know.
We need to start talking about that soon.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's it for now. Bye.
Bye.